Hello, we are broadcasted from in the basement at an undisclosed location.
The sadness will last forever. Those were the words said by Vincent Van Gogh after he shot himself with a revolver. He died 2 days later in hospital with his brother at his bedside. Let's rewind time after he shot himself with a revolver. He died 2 days later in hospital with his brother at his bedside. Van Gogh is born in Groot, Zundert, the Netherlands. Vincent's brother Theo is born. Vincent attends school in the Netherlands. He displays no signs of having his unique artistic ability. Vincent lands a job at an art dealership, which has various galleries dotted around Europe. He starts work in the branch in Hague. Vincent is transferred to its London branch. He lodges with the landlady and her daughter in South London. He falls in love with the daughter, but his feelings are not reciprocated. This is the first of a number of disastrous relationships Vincent had with the opposite sex. Vincent leaves his job by mutual consent. He returns home, turns to religion, and becomes a lay preacher in the poor mining region of the Borinage in Belgium. Vincent goes to Brussels to study art. Theo, his brother, provides him with financial support. Vincent falls in love with his cousin, Kiva Sticker, but she rejects his advances, saying no, never, never. When he proposed out of the blue, Vincent follows VK to Amsterdam and barges into her parents' home where she is staying. When they won't let him see her, Vincent burns himself by holding his hand over a candle. Later, in a letter to his brother Theo, December 1881, Vincent writes, "I'd like to be with a woman, can't live without love, without a woman. I can't care a fig for life if there wasn't something infinite, something deep, something real." Vincent meets a pregnant prostitute called Sion. He moves her and her daughter into his small studio. After the baby is born, Sion goes back to work. This makes Vincent very jealous, and he suddenly packs up his painting gear and moves out. Vincent moves back to his parents' house. He strikes up a relationship with the neighbor's daughter, Margot. She reciprocates, but when he proposes to Margot, her parents suddenly object to the marriage and Margot poisons herself. She survives, but the relationship doesn't. Vincent paints The Potato Eaters, one of his most famous paintings. Vincent moves to Paris to live with his brother Theo, who is by now a successful art dealer. Theo introduces him to the Impressionists who were living in Paris at the time, but Vincent is a difficult house guest, and the two brothers eventually quarrel. The somewhat boorish Vincent cramps his sophisticated brother's style. Vincent has a 4-month relationship with Augusta Segatori, the owner of Parisian restaurant, but when she falls ill, the ever-suspicious Vincent wrecks things by accusing her of having an abortion or a miscarriage while carrying another man's child. Vincent moves to Arles in the south of France. His plan was to establish an artist colony where like-minded painters can work, discuss their ideas, and enjoy life. Sadly, though somewhat inevitably, this utopia fails to materialize. Paul Gauguin moves into the Yellow House. At first, things go well. The two men get on and paint similar motifs, including, most famously, the night cafe. The two men spend 63 days living together. Van Gogh cuts off his left ear. Although the precise events remain unclear, the most likely sequence of events is that Gauguin and Van Gogh have a blazing row, perhaps about a model that sits for them who likes Gauguin, making Vincent jealous. Van Gogh severs a large portion of his left ear. Van Gogh delivers the bloody mess to a worker, perhaps a cleaner, perhaps a prostitute at a local brothel. Her name is Rachel. Van Gogh returns home and passes out. The authorities are summoned. The authorities think Van Gogh is dead, arrest Gauguin for his murder. Realizing their mistake, they release him, who promptly leaves town and never sees Van Gogh again. Theo travels to see Vincent. He arranges medical treatment in a local hospital in the first instance, but by May 1889 it becomes clear that Vincent will need more specialist treatment in a local asylum. Vincent Van Gogh voluntarily admits himself to the St. Remy asylum. The asylum is only half full, and he is well treated, being allowed to set up a studio in a spare room. Van Gogh paints Starry Night, one of his most famous works, from his room in St. Remy. Van Gogh paints Wheatfield with Cypresses, another of his famous paintings. Van Gogh leaves the St. Remy asylum and travels to a small village close to Paris. He is to be supervised by Dr. Paul Gachet. At first, he is hopeful that Gachet will be able to help him, and the two men certainly get on. Vincent paints Gachet's portrait on 2 occasions. Van Gogh shoots himself in the chest. He staggers back into his lodgings and dies 2 days later. It is most likely that Van Gogh's death was suicide. However, Van Gogh's scholars propose a different theory, that he was murdered by local boys, but that he pretended that he had shot himself so as to keep them out of trouble. I worked for years on my art form, books, and seemed no closer to success than when I started. How is that possible? How is it that after all that time, I still haven't reached success? Then I think Vincent Van Gogh died penniless at the mercy of his brother's charity. It was Theo who supported him, who encouraged him, and yet few know that. Who was behind him? It was Theo who supported him, who encouraged him, who helped him with his mental illness. It was Theo who loved him. He was his brother, his best friend, his only real friend, the only friend he needed. Theo was unnoticed, uncelebrated, but it was he who showcased his brother's work, and it was he who believed in him when no one else did. And what about Vincent himself? Vincent was a very troubled man, a lonely man, a childless dreamer who wanted a family, to be loved by a woman, to be worthy. He was incredibly unwell, and through all of his struggles, his pain and tribulations, he still held on to his paintbrush. He held on to his canvas. He held on to his muse. Consider this. One of the greatest artists in the world died unrecognized. A pauper with few sales of his work in his lifetime. No recognition, no accolades. Remember this whenever you feel unnoticed. Your work undervalued, underappreciated. Perhaps your biggest supporters are yet to be born. You just witnessed a man's entire life flash by in a short video. You seen some of his humanity. A man you probably thought highly of, or who perhaps you thought had it all figured out. His entire life flashed by you as he busied himself with his work, unrecognized or paid for it. He busied himself like a bee. Funny, he loved to paint bees. Bees live 40 days, take pollen from about 1,000 flowers, and their entire life work amounts to 1 teaspoon of honey. 1 tiny teaspoon, that's all. They produce 1 teaspoon in their entire life. Van Gogh gave us his teaspoon. Now it's your turn. Give us yours.